What makes your heart tick? What spiritual path are you on? What do you believe? Let's dive deep into all things mystical, into the heart of the matter. You're listening to Deep Water with Cheryl, Earth Alchemy. This is Cheryl, and you are listening to Deep Water with Michael from Damon Seed Astrology. Michael, how are you doing on this cold February day?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. How are
That's
you?
good. That's good. I'm doing great. I'm snowed in, but hey, we're going to have some fun, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions for you. How long have you been doing astrology?
So I've been doing astrology really intensely for about like 12 years.
Hmm.
And before that, I was more of a general occultist involved in all
Okay.
sorts of, occult things and really trying to research human consciousness. I've been fascinated with human consciousness and also I've been pulled to the old gods for most of my life. I've been a pagan.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah, about like 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I had an experience that completely blew my reality apart, which made my maybe really understand the reality of astrology. And just I went into a state of I started meditating like 2 hours a day
Mm.
for like 6 years. So I just became an ascetic student of astrology and of occult in general.
Okay. And you said you were pagan. And what does that mean to you?
So I'm a polytheist and a pantheist, and I'm one of these strange people that I see the validity of the of monotheism and of pantheism and of polytheism. So I the problem I have with monotheists is that they reject sides of divinity, the pantheist and the polytheist. Deep into human history, clearly there's been multiple faces of God, and you just can't understand reality as just the black and white sort of Christian thinking.
Right, right. Like, so do you believe in a God, but not just the Abrahamic God, but a God in general, just like the Godhead of sorts?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have sort of um, I go back to like Agrippa and some other of the other occultists who sort of who ascribe a lot of the like see the Godhead as like a rainbow essentially, in which each of the gods has primary dominion of like a color and a swath of reality.
Right,
And
right.
reality is the conflict and the harmony between these godheads as they interact. And they're This is why I believe that astrology was based in the zodiac is based in the seasons. Really,
Hmm.
it's not about the stars so much as it's about the seasons, and each of these gods rules a season, so they have a natural ability to shepherd the life force through a particular season, and they have affinities for other seasons potentially when you get into exaltations and other ideas like that. And decans, I work a lot with the decans. I work with the bounds and other minor dignities much more than a lot of other astrologers do.
Okay, well, that's interesting. A lot of astrologers don't. They don't really even understand what the difference is between like Hellenistic astrology versus other forms of astrology, basically, like the majority of people. I'm curious, where did you get your name for your business?
Okay, so Damon or Diamond Seed astrology is it's sort of a riff on the demon seed. You know, the idea of a demon or an angel is an intermediary between gods and men, essentially. So
Hmm.
if you talk about like Hecate or some of the other gods, like Mercury is sometimes considered the sort of a intermediary god, and the daimon or daemon is a intermediary. So this the idea of my business name is that I want to help plant a seed of this daimon in psyche. The daimon also is linked to genius, to an individual's particular genius, and I believe that through the study of astrology, you can start to tap into one's particular genius.
And back, you say what, 12 years ago, you got into astrology really deep. Was there a certain experience that made you dive deeper, as far as in with the astrology, not so much the occult, but the astrology itself?
Yeah, so about 12 years ago, I had a relationship that sort of imploded really badly, and I got into a state where I could not I couldn't sleep. I couldn't um, stop my brain for a minute. I would wake up thinking the same things that when I went to bed, I would have all of those stories going through my head, and
The rumination, yeah.
I started to understand that I was the only one who could change that for myself. And I started to see that there was certain patterns within my own thinking and my psyche that were uh, clearly started to link up with my astrological chart in ways that I just couldn't ignore. And that the combination of this sort of meltdown with the with starting to see deeper, more deeply into my own psyche and into the how these patterns are in the world as well. That really crystallized essentially over the course of many years, which eventually came formed in my book.
Speaking of your book, it's about Virgo, am I correct?
It is a sort of a meditation on the mostly the archetype of Venus and the archetype of Mercury. These
Okay.
these these how these two characters really interact and what their basic relationship is, and how this viewing this relationship in the dignity scheme of astrology, it becomes obvious that Mercury is a much bigger uh, god, a much more important god than you might think in the Hellenistic and Greco-Roman. That's why I start to explore Odin and his relationship to Freya. I see the zodiac really as being these gods shepherding the life force through the seasons, and Venus has a extremely important connection to that. And I think you can see Venus is exalted in Pisces, and she's in her fall in Virgo. And in Pisces, it's my theory essentially. What I the book is that in Pisces, the life force has been underground essentially for the winter months, and in Pisces, the goddess is sort of all imaginal. She's something that we're dreaming of. She's this
Mhm.
amazing, far off, gorgeous being that is about to emerge from the earth. So Pisces is it's all the goddess is all imagination essentially. And then in Virgo, after the life force has been birthed essentially into being, the goddess becomes flesh, and she gets harvested. Her flesh is harvested, and in Pisces, she's ruled by Jupiter, And Jupiter is all about this imagination, about like envisioning, this expansive idea of the goddess.
Mhm.
He
Mm.
shepherds her through from Sagittarius, where he gives her the faith and courage she needs to get through the winter. Then in Pisces, she is exhausted from the winter, and she's about to, be birthed into the outer world. So Pisces is sort of this introverted but projecting outwards, and Virgo is a place where she's fully flesh, and she's in fall there because she doesn't like that as much. She wants to be imagined, she wants to be dreamed of, she doesn't want to be the flesh. It's a much more uncomfortable place because the flesh is imperfect.
Right. And Virgo is analytical.
Virgo is analytical, and Mercury rules Virgo, and he is
Mhm.
responsible for our ability to tell the wheat from the chaff. He's the one who's going to throw away the apples that are brown and have worms in them. Jupiter doesn't want to do that, and Jupiter is in detriment in Virgo. So there's these are different ways of knowing. There are different approaches to the goddess, essentially. And I see the zodiac as describing different attitudes towards the goddess, and helping and when I say the goddess, you can look to the Persephone myth as being
Mhm.
the essential story of the zodiac. The zodiac is
Mhm.
telling us the Persephone myth.
Okay, so what made you more of a Hellenistic astrologer versus like an evolutionary astrologer versus another astrologer? What made you just dive deep in your research of, I think on your Facebook it says the applied cosmos.
So for me, um, what I'm doing is looking for the roots of astrology. I'm looking for the mythological roots of astrology, and modern astrology is, in my opinion, it has lost a lot of the most basic way of thinking that ancient people had.
Yes.
We're so far away from our roots at this point. It's in my book. I talk about that. It's really like modern astrology has a bunch of keywords. Keywords aren't rooted in much of anything. We have rulerships that people just move around pretty much as they want to. We have people, giving Pluto rulership of Scorpio, and I understand um, the affinity for between Pluto and Scorpio, but that basically blots out a lot of Mars essential meanings. If we
Right.
give Pisces over to Neptune, we lose a lot of Jupiter's essential meanings. The other thing is that ancient peoples, the idea of a trinity of gods was a very solid pagan idea long before the Catholics absconded with it.
Right,
The,
right, right.
the Godhead of three parts was an extremely important part of the worship of Dionysus. As some other people get into it, it was often believed that Apollo and Dionysus and Zeus were three aspects of the same god, and
Right.
you
Yes, like the monad. I've been doing the Corpus Hermeticum, and it talks about the monad. It's like God isn't really like a material thing. It's like a essence or whatever, and it's like always try. It's the thought. And then it's the embodiment. Like
right, absolutely, yeah. So even this very basic idea of what God is, of what these things mean, we are looking through a Christian lens. People who even
mhm.
think they're pagans don't understand that there's all of these basic principles that are kind of hidden in Christianity, of all
I,
places.
I'm glad you said that because I've been thinking the same thing for a little while, for about a year now. It's like a lot of pagans, they treat it like it's Christianity. They
Right. Right.
They worship it like they worship Christianity, and I don't feel that that's what paganism means in the or in the ancient world. I don't feel like we're worshiping. I think we're bringing to life, and and working with, and
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the other ideas that I've kind of expounded on is the idea that you worship a goddess differently than you do a god.
ooh, yeah. Come
That
on.
the goddess is somebody who we need to find. That we need to be masculine in order to discover the goddess. She does not fill us. We see her and we fill her with our consciousness, and we bring her to. She's the material world. So the material world is essentially given life and divinity through our appreciation of it, through our love of it.
Right,
And
right.
that's the god projects into us like the sun. The god
Yeah,
illuminates the goddess. And these are two different ways of worshiping. So if you have the same, if you think of the goddess, you think of God worshiping the goddess in the same way that you're thinking of worshiping the god, you're actually missing the boat. This is like something that's very essential to me. I think it's and pagans don't even talk about this. You think about worshiping, a goddess, you think about doing it the same way you do a god, and I see them as being essentially different.
do you see that women and men should worship differently the goddess?
I think not necessarily, but I think there's, as a male, and yeah, I mean, I think there should be more of an emphasis on the the masculine side of worship for men, and more of an emphasis on the more feminine side. It depends on the person too, as astrology tells us.
Right,
There are
right.
males who have much more feminine characteristics, and that doesn't make them in any way less masculine overall.
Or
But
less feminine. Like I'm a Sagittarius and I've got 4 placements in Sagittarius, so I could be really masculine at times, but I don't think that takes away from my femininity.
absolutely not. No, and I think that's the beauty of what astrology gives us, rather than the gender ideology people who are so incredibly literal with all of
Right.
this. It's actually incredibly damaging to us. Like, we got to be black and white. We got to be one or the other, or whatever they're doing
Or
now. Which
it's
is
gotta
so
be on the physical. That's where they're seeing it. They're
right,
seeing it more on a physical instead of a more of an embodiment on the internal.
right, exactly. And I've also written a good bit about the gynomorph and the androgyne and all of these these ideas of that go way back before Christianity,
Mhm.
where males trying to take on female characteristics through castration and um, other means. That I think that it's way older than Christianity. You have the various cults of men who would castrate themselves in the name of the goddess
Mhm. Mhm.
Cabell and Attis and that sort of thing, and that's reemerging right now, and it's a really dangerous misapprehension of um, that, and the fact that it's pagan doesn't mean it's any better. Um,
Right, right.
finding roots of these things pre-Christianity doesn't make it any better, and also ignoring it's the fact that it's the roots of Christianity are in that gynomorphic. Christ was, in fact, aspiring to be an androgyne. That
Right,
was,
or androgyny. There's lots of androgyny.
yeah, a ton of androgyny, and that that's essentially a metaphor that went off the rails a long time ago. That wasn't. It's an important metaphor to understand the alchemical wedding. That bringing those parts of oneself together is, but that doesn't negate the outward reality of one's gender and how one behaves in the world.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
I do, and there's a very ancient idea of reincarnation that has also been lost. That's very pagan, which is that we are uh, blood reincarnated. That we come back as members of the same clan or family, and
Mhm.
that doesn't change. So our highest calling essentially is the calling of our clan and our bloodline, which
Oh,
when it's taken too far, it can be dangerous. But that is actually the real tradition of around the world that people were reincarnated into their actual bloodline. So these ideas, people today look at that and they see that as something really dangerous and like this is racist or something like that, and it's not
well,
racist.
it's in the blood. I mean, you can't help it, right? It's not
Right.
something you can think of that's gonna like you can't change it. On the note of like the way the out of control erogyny or the androgyne, or where they're trying to remorph it, do you think that has anything to do with reincarnation, as far as in like someone was a female in a past life and they reincarnate, they're a male this life and they're still having issues being in this body?
I think there's some of that. I think
Mhm.
there's certainly a large psyop going on that's bringing people to um, believe that's true when it's not so much true. I do think there is some of that reality, but I think the psyop is real, and people are responding to a some societal conditioning and obviously a certain degree of Marxism that's taken hold. Um,
Yeah. um
the Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what do you think has been misrepresented? I can't say it, in the Greek mythology when it comes to all this.
Let's see. So the Greek mythology, I think you have to go back to the pre-Socratics, to like Heraclitus, to the really early Greek philosophers to get some a really good idea of what the mythology was really pointing at. Because when you get to Plato and the sort of the axial age, you get um, the idea that humanity can't handle the kind of rawness that the gods represent. That the truth that we can't handle the truth, that we need an intermediary priest class to basically lie to us about what's going on in the world. Because if we took in nature as it really is, and we were given a not dumbed down idea of what the world is really is, we'd behave badly.
Would
Um,
be more heathenistic.
yeah, yeah, and it's not untrue. There does need to be some sort of um, there needs to be a really intelligent approach to teaching reality as it is. Otherwise, we get a we can go slightly crazy. Um, but I don't Yeah, I don't think we need to dumb ourselves down. I think the opposite's true. I think we need to be prepared to deal with who and what we are, which is extremely complicated. Humans are very complicated, and we are divine. We are truly a representation of the Godhead. Um, yeah, I think we're. It's been my thesis that if you look into Hellenistic astrology, you'll find that in the Hellenistic era, they were looking back to a time when astrologers knew a lot more than they did. They were already saying 2,000 years ago that a lot had been lost. That was 2,000 years ago. So they were already looking back to like a golden age of astrology, which had long been missing. So again, like going back to the pre-Socratics, looking at what they were saying, like really deeply. It's I think that's where we need to start and be prepared to parse out everything that came after that.
Do you think that astrology is going to become more popular, or with what's going on with the astrology, it will be more underground?
That got slightly garbled. Can you repeat that?
Do you think that with the astrology that is going on right now in the sky, do you think astrology will become more popular, or do you think it will have to go underground?
Will it become more popular or have to go underground?
Yeah.
Um, I think it will become more popular. Honestly, I think there's a lot of um, I think there's a lot of people who are really waking up to it at this point.
Mhm.
But I think um, there's definitely, you know, modern astrology, and I don't want to trash modern astrology too much because I think in a lot of ways it's held together, and it acts as an entry point to what's much deeper, and much more pagan. Um, uh, I think people are going to be looking for much more depth out of their astrology in the coming years. I think that will be really pretty amazing. Honestly, I think as people move towards a more truly pagan idea of astrology, and when I talk about paganism, I'm also like I think there's in the Western tradition a lot more dualist monism, like uh, essentially like Taoism, which is again like when I talk about worshiping the goddess and the god. I think that's really where things have to go. You got to get a lot more depth, and a lot of people can't handle that, or they just they can talk about dualist monism, but they don't live it. They don't actually go any further in their attempts to understand it.
Okay, on that note, do you think that with the way you're into human psychology and the consciousness, do you think that you have tapped into your feminine in order for you to understand it in the depth that you do?
Yeah, yeah. So I have I don't know if you know my chart at all. I have
No,
four
I
planets.
I know you're an Aries, I think.
Yeah, I have four planets in Aries, including a retrograde Venus in Aries. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, I have a, I have a Pisces moon. Um,
oh,
yeah, the Pisces and the Aries together. When you get placements that are on either side of the equinox, especially at that particular point. And my north node is sitting directly on the equinox. Like if you go by true node versus the other node, the one's on Pisces side and the other's on the Aries side. So um, I do believe in the zodiac. The wheel, essentially the solstice points and the equinoctial points are really important. Like that, use those to read enough. So if you have placements near equinox or the solstice, um, that means something essentially. You know what I'm saying? They're really important, and they were very important to ancient people. So things that happen around them are really important. But back to my chart, the Pisces moon is um, very feminine.
oh
It's
yeah, it's
very
sensitive.
very. There's a lot of uh, confusingly so. Not like I think I'm a woman or anything, but it's like Pisces is a very it's very feminine. It's very receptive. It's very empathetic. Um,
What house is it in?
it's in my 10th house.
Oh,
Moon's in my 10th house. Yeah, yeah. I'm Gemini rising, so therefore, writing books and such.
well, it's been working for you.
Yeah,
For you to have so much fire, and then that water moon, the water emotion and mind, and it was probably a hard road to like decipher really what was going on inside of you.
yeah, yeah. I think Pisces placements are very difficult in general. I've known a lot of Pisces stelliums, and they can be very difficult people. I don't feel
Mhm.
there's a lot to go through there in that Pisces territory. Pisces is sort of a fascination of mine, and the book Venus and Virgo. I I spend probably like a third of the book talking about Pisces because I think there's so much. And if you're going to talk about Virgo, you can't make sense of Virgo without talking about Pisces. Same with any, like, you can't understand Aries without really looking at Libra or Gemini, you know, with Sagittarius.
Right.
The
Well, I'm a Sagittarius sun sign and Virgo ascendant, so if that tells
oh,
you anything.
yeah, cool, cool, yeah, yeah, yeah. The
So,
Virgo, got so many Virgos in my life and Virgo ascendants. It's amazing.
well, I'm trying to work with the North nodes, so I'm not all too Virgo and trying to go with that Pisces flow with what I'm doing. I could be so picky on every little thing, so I have to just like watch it.
Right,
I,
right,
I
right.
spend more time editing than I do anything else.
Yeah.
But with the astrology now, where do you see us going?
In the near future,
Well, or even just in the next week.
well, there's so many changes happening, and there's a few retrogrades going on. You got Mars is coming out of retrograde. You've got Mercury retrograde coming up. You've got the Venus retrograde. There's and the Mercury retrograde and the Venus retrograde are both in Aries. Very, which is, I've got that in my chart too. That
Dun
Venus.
dun dun.
Yeah, yeah. Um, in the near future, this is so I've written a fair amount about the uh, really the collapse of a certain paradigm, which is trying to like attach itself to our reality and like a tick, essentially.
Mhm.
the 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 paradigm, which is this bio-Leninism, the and bio-Leninism is a very interesting term. It's the people who have gotten into um, the idea that it's transhumanism, essentially, um, but particularly the transgender, the gender ideology, these the also the medical establishment being completely out of control. Um, those things
Okay.
are crashing down. Those things
Yes.
are falling apart. And I see
Yes.
that
Now,
in the
I got a question for you. When it
yeah.
pertains to the Greek and the medical and all that, like, do you think that this is where, like, with all the magic and the potions back in the ancient time, that's where pharmacy come from, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
like, with the fall of Rome, wasn't this kind of what brought on the fall of Rome?
Yes. Yeah. So the the Dionysian cults were, as far as I can see it, were out of control. They were. There's been, you can hear like Michael Sarian talk about Julian Jaynes and the ideas that human consciousness changed about a couple thousand years ago. That our ability to uh, sort of reason,
And
uh,
language.
yeah, and language changed. Like the
Yes.
which is such a double-edged sword with all this. It's such a, like, Greek clearly had so many more levels of meaning going on at any one time that we are bereft of. We're looking for everything to mean one thing, and things mean multiple things. Um, as far as pharmakia, absolutely, I think the people in ancient times were running around roofing each other. They were like dosing each other. They were going through drug rituals all the time. This was a much more central part of people's lives, and I think the Roman Empire saw what was going on and they had a problem with it because they persecuted a lot of the pirates and the human traffickers. They were trying to
Mhm.
get rid of them, and I think eventually they lost to the human traffickers. They lost to those people. I think that's a hidden part of history that
So do you
uh,
think that's still from then all the way to now, you think that's still going on with these same cults?
yes, yes, I do think so. I think the pharmakia is clearly it's done so much damage. Modern pharmaceutical industry, the whole idea of diagnosis, that people identify themselves with a
Mhm.
diagnosis, is it's an incredibly damaging thing. Idea that you can change who you are through hormonal injections or mutilations. These are materialist traps that people have fallen into that are just deadly for our psyche. I'm a person who I don't believe in germ theory. I'm a German New Medicine person. I think there's people template after each other. When they see each other getting sick, they will follow suit because that's what humans do. We tend to go into a herd mind. We will act as others do.
Right.
If you
So
do
you
not,
think the reason we do that, I mean, because we do go into herd mind quite a lot, even if it's a small little herd,
yep.
and we like defend it to the end. What do you think? Do you think it's our birth charts that make us do that? Do you think it's something else?
Um, I think the birth chart can make you more or less susceptible to it. I think there is free will for all of us to break free of this sort of conditioning. That's something that's a person's chart can certainly push one more in that direction, or it can push you out of it. But there's so many basic problems with the way that we are taught, like who and what we are. There's so much fear in our makeup, and it's gotten just worse over time. And it feels like it's approaching a breaking point right now to me, and that's I may be more hopeful than I know a lot of people who are very black pilled about this. They believe that the Illuminati are controlling everything, and it's a simulation, and all of these things. And I can't accept anything like that personally.
Well,
Um,
I've asked everybody that I've interviewed so far the simulation theory or the monad. And of course, everyone said the monad in their own little words. So,
right, right, right. And I can see the attraction to the simulation theory.
mhm.
It's an attractive idea. It's another way of giving up one's sovereignty as a human being, which is ironic because a lot of these people who also talk about the simulation theory are very much they talk about sovereignty too, but their entire uh, idea of how the cosmology doesn't really allow for sovereignty. So, how are you being sovereign if you're, if you've got
Right, right.
a
In your little
cosmology that
sim.
will
Right.
allow?
So, do you think that that also ties into Gnosticism?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Gnosticism. So, while I criticize Gnosticism, I would tell everybody to read the Gnostics. Definitely read them. Like, go study them. This is I don't agree with them, but they were along with the Hermeticists, the occultists in like for the last I don't know 1500 years have largely conflated a lot of the Hermeticism and the Gnosticism. They didn't really know the difference, and as Michael Sarian talks about, the German philosophers really got back to this a dualist monism, an idea that the world works through opposing forces that have to be in conflict with each other. That's how you grow. That's how we become
Right.
who we're supposed to be.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, yeah, precisely.
Yeah, in this last little chapter that I actually published today, the Corpus Hermeticum, it talks about this, like, how God is good and that it's the only thing that's good because we have motion and motion in the planets, so we bump it up against each other. That's what makes us like do the things that we do and be who we
Right.
are, and all the cosmology of it all. Do you think that the Gnostics cosmology versus like pagan cosmology is completely off?
So I think there's so many pagan cosmologies out there that we need to like. Um, there's no pagan doesn't have. There's no pagan unified cosmology. There's where we get our cosmology through paganism is through mythology, and mythology is open. It literally has multiple layers. Its texts are the mythologies, and they were not written down for the most part for quite a long time. The idea that you write something down and then it's a it's it's a text that you need to then follow is also a perversion, honestly, of the original way that people would use mythology. So there's so many levels of that it's just one of those things that like paganism is so open ended. A real like return to a pagan way of life would be immersing oneself in the seasons to become to truly get out in the world in nature, and regain your sanity first of all by doing that, and then reading the all of the old texts. Like for me, the um, Orphic hymns. So the Orphic hymns are one of the most important ways to get back to the archetypes because they give you lineages of these gods, which don't mean what people would think. There's not they had sex and there's here's another god. It's like these. This is where the lineman between these two gods, takes on its own identity. It's like there's a place where Mercury meets Venus, and you have hermaphrodite between there, and to literally say hermaphrodite is a hermaphrodite because it is that too, but it's also what happens when what, these two archetypes meet. You have Mars meets Aphrodite, like their children are like if Mars has the color red, and you can give Aphrodite a few different colors, but green and like what happens when these colors come together? Like it's like a rainbow, and you've got alignment between each of the colors, and each of that's a child essentially that's born of that. The whole metaphorical language of the Orphic hymns, like it's really amazing to just really dig into that. For like a couple of years, every morning I would read the Orphic hymns that pertain to each of the days of the week. So if you're on Tuesday, you've got anything about Mars, and then there's more like the Curates and other like entities that correspond to a martial thing. You then like branch out and like start looking at the other Orphic hymns, and then you have to realize that the Orphic hymns are also um, they're tainted too because this was starting to be when things were starting to fall apart. In my seeing of my reading of the pagan journey essentially,
Do you think that the Orphic hymns
and then you
is
should look
where
at like Christian stuff too. Go ahead.
do you think the Orphic hymns are where Christianity kind of got some of its stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 I think you got to look at the goddess cults as being the really a lot of the origins of Christianity came out of the goddess cults.
Okay.
And I do believe that Christ is is Dionysus. That's really the that's what he is. I mean, the dying and rising god. You know, Persephone was the mother of Dionysus. There's the Immaculate Conception, the story of Zagreus, the baby Dionysus who was ripped apart by the Titans, and
Mhm.
then Zeus came and took the heart of Zagreus and sewed it into his thigh,
Mhm.
gestated, so it was a twice born baby. So that's like Christ going into the tomb and coming back out after having been with his father, essentially being reborn into this masculine like world. Um, you can see the how these things translate.
Do you think that people, instead of just knowing their birth chart, that they should actually work with the birth chart when we go through the transits, on a daily basis?
Yeah, 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 totally. I think kind of a meditation more than anything because I think if you expect something to happen because you have this thing in your chart, you tend to set yourself up for like if you imagine it, it'll probably happen, or you'll interpret it that way because that's what you expect. I think it's a meditation, and like the archetypes of the planets have there's so much depth in them. Like there's so much depth, and I mean, you have a zodiac, you have Jupiter ruling Sagittarius and Jupiter ruling Pisces, and those two places are very different, you know. But those are two aspects of Zeus. They're two, and Neptune is another, the Trinity again. You get the Trinity, and Neptune is another aspect of Zeus. There's part of the same Godhead, you know. So
Is there anything that you would like to tell the audience about what you're doing, where they can find you? We've got about 15 minutes, so I mean, of course, take your time. And also your music. I wanted to touch down. I know you play the stand-up bass.
yes, yeah.
Yes. How long
So
have you been playing the stand-up bass?
I've been playing the Santa bass for since I was a teenager. I started at like age 15. I really have a, I have a love hate relationship with jazz. I'm like a jazz bassist. That's
Mhm.
mostly what I do, and I find jazz to be kind of it's great. It's open ended. I love to improvise, but I'm always looking for projects that are like not just jazz standards. Like where you get to somebody else's tune. I love um, improvising over other chord progressions, not just "Fly Me to the Moon" and all the kind of corny stuff that you get. But that's sort of where my skill lies is in the jazz realm, improvisation. Um, yeah, I do compose. I'm working on. I have a band with a good friend of mine that does sort of gypsy jazz, and it's got a very strong Eastern European and sort of like it's got a lot of influence from non rock, non jazz, like the Middle Eastern, North African kind of thing.
So it's got some
So
beats to it.
yeah, 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 and I love traditional European music, the Hailong and other groups like that.
Yeah. Do you think that's helped paganism in a whole, as a whole, as far as in Hyalong?
Oh yeah, yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. I love what they do, just visually and the whole their presentation. I just love that fact that they're out there doing that. It makes all of the unfortunate associations of European spirituality with very bad political movements. When you start to see what European spirituality is through the music, it gives it all. It's so much more humanizing and so beautiful. Really, I think that they've
Mhm.
done a great thing.
Do you think that the Greek have taken some of the Norse or Germanic gods and morphed them a little bit?
So if you look at the Norse gods and compare like the Norse the Eddas to the Vedas, you'll find I think that that may be the older like more um, root uh, tradition than the Greeks what the Greeks did, and I love Greek mythology. I'm totally into it, but I think it got tainted in some ways. And again, I'm not, it's there's nothing wrong with it per se, but I think if you look archetypally, I see the gods as being functional actors in a story, which is the story being the mythology, and you can see them doing different things. Again, Odin is has been strongly connected to a lot of the things that Mercury is connected to, but Odin is the king of the gods, and he's the he's the god, the All Father. So I think the gods are placed in different ways versus you got Jupiter slash Zeus, the sky god, this sort of placing the sky god above everything, where and that's we get Christianity, you got your sky god, you got your Yahweh, who's a
And
you
sun
know
worship.
yeah, sun worship, and as I said, it's more than that. It's Uranus. Like Uranus is the sky, the whole sky.
Hmm.
You're looking
He is
up
the
to the
father
sky.
of the sky.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas Odin, what he does, he's following Freya around to try and learn her magic. He's like he's learns the feminine magic, which he caught hell for that, like from the other gods, that he was
Right.
learning the women's magic.
Well, that's
So
where that duality comes into play.
right, right, and the mercurial archetype is really the mercurial archetype is trying to, like, he follows the goddess around, essentially. He's trying to figure out her magic.
Right.
That's the essential, like, relationship between the masculine and the feminine, is like trying to get, how do you create?
Right, and I have a question on that when it pertains to magic. Do you think, well, I want to say men, but I don't want to be the stereotypical woman. Do you think humans you have to have the masculine and the feminine to actually create a magic? Like the man has to actually have a feminine energy with them, or and vice versa. The female has to have a masculine with them to actually do real magic.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. Yeah, there's different types of magic. Obviously, you have in the Norse tradition, you've got the Sather and
Hmm.
the Galder, and um, there's reasons why the men would traditionally have a certain type of magic, and the women have another type of magic. Just as in the Norse tradition, there would be a patriarchy coexisting with a matriarchy, essentially, and they did different things. You'd have a council of women and a council of men. You wouldn't hear about the council of women because they hid them, because they were too valuable. They wouldn't put their women out front. So there was a whole logic to the way society was organized that people don't understand. You know,
Right.
it's
Do you think that in
complicated, and
this
there's good reasons for why.
finish your thought?
Go ahead. Oh no, that was it.
Okay. Do you think that with the ideology that's being pushed today, that the people that are searching for, the trans movement, that are searching for something outside of themselves, do you think that they will ever come to terms with that part of themselves in the material world?
I think so long as they're following the trans ideology and that approach to reality, they won't. I think their ideology and their cosmology and the idea that they can change identities through pharmakia, essentially, or just simply asserting it, like I am this, and you have to believe what I am, and you're not allowed to question that. That's a solipsistic kind of narcissistic presumption of how the world works. Because I won't be told by somebody else who they are. I will figure out who they are. You know,
Right, right,
what you
right,
say you are. I'm not going. It's my responsibility to figure out who you are to me.
right,
You don't get to tell other people who you are. Honestly, you can make your case, but then, like, reality is like you are what you do. Not who you say you are. That's why the pronoun thing is really problematic. It's sort of like trying to say my version. I'm only the one who's allowed to tell you who I am, when it's actually your responsibility to figure out who I am.
right. Do
Yeah.
you think that the push for this ideology is actually suppressing the feminine, as in the just the essence alone? Not say women, but the essence of the feminine.
Yeah, I think it's femininity is a force of nature, it is what it is, and it's femininity is defined by masculinity, and masculinity is defined by femininity. And if you're trying to force these things into some ideas of what they are, that's not how things really work. They're in a constant flux. There's alignment between the two of them, and that's where we live. There's this place between the masculine and the feminine, which are, as you move away from things, they become more absolute. The light and the dark. But we're in that gray area constantly. Sort of like I feel like the trans movement, they're kind of stuck in looking for something absolute, like looking for like hormones to define who they are and surgeries to define who they are, which is just an extension of what people have been thinking for a long time. That's like these who we are versus like this much more profound discovery of who we are and who other people are.
Right. I mean, nowadays, or like back in the old days, when I was a kid, I mean, they said that the clothes don't make the man. So, like right now, the clothes actually makes the woman,
Right.
if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
don't really see it that way, but that's what it's portrayed into the world.
Yeah.
What is your best advice for women who want to tap into more of their femininity when it comes to their astrology?
That's an interesting question. I think so. I read for a lot of women all the time. Like and I have a particular, like, I have uh, my reading of certain planets like Uranus, and when you have like your Saturn placements in Saturn rule places, I've my astrology is really strongly based in the idea that the masculine and feminine are in conflict constantly, and there's a tendency to emasculate oneself and to emasculate others. That men do it to themselves, and women do it all the time. And when I don't have like like a boilerplate advice to women, but I would like to, I start talking about the archetypes when I'm doing readings in this way, and usually like people get like realizations while I'm speaking about the archetypes in this way, what they do. Um, so, yeah, I
Okay, well, take the astrology out of it. What's your best advice for women as a man yourself for
yeah,
their femininity?
for their femininity.
Yeah,
Um,
because like there's a lot of women. I mean, I'm guilty of it where I feel like I have to be masculine in this world. It takes a lot for women nowadays to actually be receptive, to sit down and to just be. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I see it around me constantly. Women who are um,
Go go go.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Go, go, go. And really in denial of their femininity. And I think they're scared to be truly receptive. I think they haven't even been taught to be truly or embrace the idea that that's valuable. That
Right.
they're
Well, we've had to fight a lot over the past. I mean, women my age, anyways. I'm getting up there. So like we've had to really fight for what we want in this world. And I've come to realize
right,
just over the past year or two, well, since COVID, that the more I sit and the more I am receptive and the more I feel good about myself and take good care of myself, whether it's through food or music and just being around people that actually are worth being around, that my femininity comes out more. When I'm not stressing constantly, I don't always want to put my will force in the world where I could just sit back and listen.
right, right.
So
Yeah, I. It's so interesting because women like you'll find in the business world like there's like grants out there for women owned businesses, and like there's like you go to, and I live in the Northeast, which is particularly liberal, and it's been trying to really it's very emasculating for men, and I mean the empowerment it gives to women I think is false. It's trying to prop up women as if they were men.
Right, right, right. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, then
I mean,
that's not, I have no problem with women being successful in business. I think that's fantastic, but I think it's gone off the rails at this point where, like women women-owned businesses actually have a much easier time here than they do in other places.
I
eh,
need to move there.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of false though because it's at somebody's expense, you know.
Right, right, right. I've looked at those like those grants and stuff, and I've thought about applying for them, but I don't have enough like I guess enough of that masculine energy to want to push and like jump through all these hoops and prove myself. And I'm just like, well, if it happens, it happens. So
Yeah. Yeah, and the grant writing world is pretty ugly when you get to it, really, because it's a lot of people who are trying to get public money
right,
versus
right.
something that's organic, putting something out in the world. Because I know a lot of women artists out here who are extraordinarily successful, and it's not because they got grants or anything like that. They're just
They're
amazing
just
business
good.
people, and
Right. Their
there's
art's probably good.
yeah, there's aspects to business that women are better at than men. you know, there's definitely things that are, that focus. There's a lot of women I know who are more focused and like just laser focused on what they want to do in their lives, and I really, I look up to a lot of the women I know who are really successful artists. It kind of blows me away.
Okay,
But
so what's your advice to men in the world?
to men,
Yeah, I'm just trying to bring a
um,
balance back between the men and the women. I'm not about like all men or all women. I think we need to bring a balance back. So I'm going to ask you that because you talked about the women. Your advice to the men.
yeah, I think men need to be more raw, really. I think like not be afraid to offend people. Like there's a lot of political correctness, especially in the Northeast where I live, and probably in a lot of other places where men are really afraid to offend people. Like I think just like I appreciate. I have some male friends who just blurt stuff out, who are really out in the world. Like they don't care. I think
Right.
men have gotten to the point where they're uh, censoring themselves a lot. They're not as to be masculine is to be unafraid to make mistakes. So I think men should be more willing to make mistakes. Not be walking on eggshells around people. Um,
What do you
and
think about the heartbroken men that are out there? Because there's a lot of heartbroken men out there. So what do you think you could help them advise with that kind of thing?
yeah, so as Michael Sarian again talks a lot about the terrible mother and the ways in which uh, women are so unwilling to look at their own psychology, and men are kind of just there's all the incels and men who are taking on a victim role, like identifying with that. I think that's incredibly dangerous. Acting like the oppressed one, the one who's got the short end of the stick, and constantly is. Even though there's some reality to the fact that women are generally not interested in their own psychology, and it's difficult. It can be difficult to, there's of course many notable exceptions. Um, but it's really important for men to not give up, not to be the perpetual victim of all of this. I recommend men to meditate, to become very sovereign in your own identity and be willing to you know just really get in touch with yourself. And when I say that, there's a lot of sort of false um, like men's group kind of tropes around uh, that. I think that's a good start for a lot of men who have no, you know, contact with other men, and they're not like getting support from other men. I think that's a great way to start, but it just like it becomes that it gets into groupthink very quickly too. So the masculine, you can do stuff like that, but then just don't fall into the groupthink, because I do
It,
see that in men that I know.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of men are kind of like that. They get I've seen online, not so much in my personal life, but online. It's a lot of victim mentalities where they're just kind of hate women because of a past relationship that happened like 15 years ago. And but what you said I think is great because getting to know themselves just like women and stop being the victim in every situation you put yourself in, you
Right,
know. And
right.
I think that you've pretty much nailed it on the head there with that. Go ahead and plug yourself, what you're doing, your YouTube, your book, and where they can find you.
Yep. So I've been doing a lot on Substack lately. My astrology. I usually do new moon and full moon astrology when there's like major events. Like I just did a piece on Mercury Cazimi that just happened. I'm working on a piece right now about Neptune finally leaving Pisces, which is a really fascinating. It's been what 13 and a half years almost. Neptune went into Pisces in like January of 2012, and I was talking about just a little aside, like the what happened in 2012 was Obama and Congress signed into law the Smith-Mundt Act, which allowed the government to propagandize the American people, and that happened
Mm.
like in a week of Neptune going into Pisces. Just to give you an idea, that's the
Well, yeah.
character Neptune in Pisces, and just whereas as we Neptune leaves Pisces, that's all coming crashing down, which is just beautiful. But so
One question
Substack.
on Saturn leaving Pisces. Do you think with Saturn leaving Pisces eventually, not not the second here or anything, but when it does, do you think that will change in the way people view Christianity?
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think Christianity has it has its very strong detractors right now, and it's such a fascinating time to be alive because all these people have, fundamentalist Christians are becoming quite a normal thing, who don't know the origins of Christianity. They don't know where it came from. It's a lot stranger and more ugly than people realize. Um, I do think Saturn going into Aries. It's Saturn. Saturn is like a largely misunderstand understood archetype. Saturn is the like a it's the boy who castrates his father because he's in love with his mother. It's very emasculating archetype, and when he goes into Aries, he's like forced to have some testicular, fortitude. It's like Saturn gets some balls. He
Some
doesn't
big
have.
balls, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
so, I don't have anything else for you. So, do you want to? You have YouTube, right?
Yep, I do have a YouTube. I haven't been doing that very much. I've been spending more time on the Substack. I have my website at michaelmsuter.com, and my book is Venus and Virgo: Archetypes of Goddess Consciousness and Astrology. It's basically tells this, the it's astrology like through the lens of the goddess. Really, like the zodiac is telling the story of the goddess, and it's telling the story of the life force as it goes through the seasons, and the archetypal planets are organically arise from the seasons. That's my thesis. That they are all about shepherding the life force through the seasons. They're the tutelary gods of the seasons, and that's the roots of things as far as I can see it. And astrology has gotten into a lot of there's a lot of technical stuff, but if it doesn't have good roots in that metaphor, it's questionable as far as I can see it. You know, um,
Right. All right. Well, I do appreciate this. I think that this has been great because I asked questions I wasn't even expecting to ask myself. So I really appreciate you. We're going to end it here. And I just wanted to say thank you again. And thank you to the audience. You guys are listening to Deep Water. This is Cheryl, Michael. Have a good night.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dian hekaten kletso, trioditin, eranen, uranian, ktonian, tekai enalian, krokopeplon, tumbitian, sukais nikuon metabakeusan, perseian, fileremon, agalomenen elaphoisi, nukterian, skulakitin, amei maketon basilean, terobromon, atzoston, apros makon eidos ekusan, turpolon, pantos kosmokledukon anasan, hegemonten, nymphen, kurotrophon, urosifoitin, isomenos kuran teletais osiais ibarenai, bukolo meniusan ae kekariotit humo,